whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it's hurting everyone. We just need everyone to help out. It's a crisis in our classrooms, and the kids are hurting from it, teachers and parents. First, we'd like to start with the pledge, so will everyone please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Common Core is a ridiculous plan to force kids to be guinea pigs in Bill Gates' experiment. Bill Gates' experiment is planned to take about 10 years. Dr. Luksik will be speaking on the matter and providing us with important facts on the situation so we can take action to help our local communities fight this. I would like to thank all our donors and promoters tonight who helped us make this night possible. I would also like to thank Kathy Sapeta, my director, for helping me plan, raise funds, and guiding me through the fight of Common Core. Kathy is the director of New York is United for Kids, and she leads one of the biggest anti-Common Core groups in the state with an outreach of over 30,000 people. New York is United for Kids provides education on Common Core and the political action to help push back on Common Core and help politicians and parents and teachers and administrators of the schools to help fight Common Core. I couldn't thank her enough, and I would like to thank her for everything that she's helped me do with this fight against Common Core. So can everyone please give her a round of applause. New York has had Common Core for 2 years now, and we're thankful for the parents, the teachers, and the elected officials who have stood in the position of full repeal of Common Core. Today, our statement is that we apologize to those who voted for any of the politicians who said they would help to get rid of Common Core, but they didn't. Assemblyman Algraff has a bill to help repeal Common Core, and it is A05142, and it has plenty of sponsors in the Assembly, but we're told that, unfortunately, we will not have a bill to repeal Common Core in the Senate, so that is extremely unfortunate. Our children are hurting, parents, teachers, and taxpayers alike. The parents need a champion, and we need a champion now. The kids need a champion to help fight this. If we don't fight this, there will be many long-term effects to this that may not be reversible, and it's really scary. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in our mission. If the politicians don't do their job, please vote them out. Because if they tell you one thing and do the other, they're obviously not fit for office, and they're violating their oath to office. So please, next election, vote them out. Also important that's coming up is the school board elections. And there's someone here tonight who will help be fighting the unconstitutional Common Core. We have local school board candidate, Adam Sackowitz, he's in the back. Adam is running for school board in East Meadow, and his election is on May 19th. He shows great effort in fighting Common Core. He's brilliant, and he's definitely the type of person we need in office fighting Common Core. So will Adam Sackowitz please come up and speak for a short amount of time?
It's a great privilege to be with you all here tonight, and really would like to thank Michael for what he's doing, and he's a true patriot, and give Michael a round of applause. Truly a remarkable young man, and we need more young people like him who are speaking out against Common Core, because Common Core is a disaster. It's failing our children, failing our teachers, and has been bad for this community especially, and has been bad for New Yorkers and Americans alike. Have been running for this seat since August. We've already knocked on over 2,000 doors. We have a clear path to victory. The unfortunate thing is that the entire East Meadow School Board, every single member, is complicit with Common Core, and we need to take the school board back. And on May 19th, we're going to start to take the school board back. There's 2 open seats, 2 candidates. I'm one of them who's running on an anti-Common Core platform, and I know we're going to win, and we're going to make a difference. because the residents of this community and districts throughout the country have had enough with Common Core, and Common Core is bad and it's failing our children, and it's time we stand up and say no and take our education system back. I'd like to share with you an article that I co-wrote with J.D. Collins, who's an editor with the Daily Caller, who's also anti-Common Core. As a millennial, I'm only 23, I'm well aware of the shortcomings of American education relative to that of our leading trade partners. And as a student of history, I consider it to be as much a threat to our long-term national security as being on the wrong side of an arms race. It's critical we get education right now, because if we lose a generation to failed education policy, it will cascade into the next succeeding generation. And then the next generation, much like an arms race. Ultimately, our education gap will become insurmountable. So a lot is at stake here, and we need to elect people to the school board who share our views, because if we don't, we're in real trouble. And Common Core will be here to stay, and Common Core will be the future, and do not want to see that happen. And it's pretty bad stuff. Top-down approach to education. Parents, in many ways, no longer have a say in their child's education, and it's really scary. And I feel that education decisions, for the most part, should be made on the local level between parents and teachers, not by bureaucrats in Albany and not by bureaucrats in Washington. So a great honor to be here with all of you tonight, and really honored to have New Yorkers United for Kids support. And together, I know that we're going to win this race, and we're going to send a loud message here in East Meadow that Common Core is not working.
Thank you, Adam. I'm honored to introduce an American hero founded on truth, Dr. Peg Luksik. She's a Pennsylvania teacher with over 35 years of experience in both special education and elementary education. She's taught at every level from preschool to college, in regular classrooms, resource centers, self-contained special education classrooms, and alternative education settings. She's trained with teachers in curriculum and classrooms all over the country. She's written numerous books and curricula. She founded a program to assist low-income single mothers with their education, which was recognized by President Reagan and named as National Point of Light by President George Bush. Peg served as the advisor to President Reagan's Commission on Family and Work for the U.S. Department of Education, where a task was to review and evaluate education curriculum. Peg was a founding member of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. Most importantly, Peg and Jim, her husband of 35 years, have raised 6 wonderful children and now are proud grandparents. Dr. Peg Luksik.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. That's more important than I am, so I'm going to ask my light dimmer to make the light go down a little bit. I'm prettier than the screen, but the screen is more important than what you're going to be looking at tonight is original documents, both contracts that have been signed by your Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education, and applications that your state has made for regulatory relief or for funding. And the reason we're looking at those things is because they are legally binding. So if the government tells you that they're doing X, but they tell Washington in a document that they use to get money or relief from regulations that they're doing Y, they're doing Y. Because it's not a crime to lie to you. But it is a crime to lie to the U.S. Department of Education on a contract document. Now, this is a long story. We're not going to be here all night. So we're going to start in 1989. In 1989, then President George Bush the Elder held an education summit with the National Governors Association. At the time, the chairman was William Clinton. That summit decided to revamp education policy in America, changing how the federal government looked at legislation. That summit became the basis for a 1994 piece of legislation called Goals 2000 that changed how we looked at schools, destroyed local control, and established national education goals. So when we talk about Common Core, and many states say, but we had standards before that. Yeah, because the federal government told you that you had to. This was never state-led. This whole movement toward all of these hundreds and hundreds of standards was from the very beginning a federal mandate. Now, when it originated in the early 90s, there was a huge outcry. And so Goals 2000 had no teeth. That changed in 2001 with the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act, which was President George Bush Jr.'s. So we had Bush the elder, who's a Republican, and Clinton, who's a Democrat, and Bush the Jr., who's a Republican. And we're going to get to President Obama, who's a Democrat. So this is not a partisan effort, because we've got people on both sides of the political aisle who are for it, and people on both sides of the political aisle who are against it. No Child Left Behind was passed in 2001. There is no role for the federal government constitutionally in education. So how did the federal government get around it? They made money available to the states and said, did you want this? Yeah. Did you want it? The states volunteered for the money. And when they volunteered for the money, they were volunteering for the control that went with it. The first big boatload of money from the federal government was actually passed in 1965. It was called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Lyndon Johnson was the president. It was part of his war on poverty. That's ESEA. Now, when the federal government makes money available to the states, they make this much money available for this much time. When the time is up, either the money in there for the program ends, or the federal government has to pass new legislation called reauthorizing. In other words, we're going to make this money available to the states again. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act has been reauthorized by the federal government, I think 7 times since it was originally passed. The 2001 reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was called No Child Left Behind. So No Child Left Behind wasn't brand new legislation. It was a continuation of an act that had originally been passed in 1965. What did No Child Left Behind say? It said the states had to create content standards and achievement standards that were rigorous. And here's where the word first surfaces. We'll look at how it's defined in Common Core later tonight. Why content standards and achievement standards? Why 2 sets of standards? Content standards were mandates from the government to the teachers. You must teach these things. And so if you walked into classrooms that had all these standards, you would see standards on the walls, and every teacher would have to take his or her lesson and then check off all the little standards that that lesson was going to cover, and they had to have a certain number of standards done by the end of the year, period. Achievement standards said this is what the child will learn. It was a mandate from the government to the individual child. So instead of the federal government's role in education being guaranteeing equal access, with No Child Left Behind, it changed to the federal government mandating equal results. Now, if I move that to healthcare, it would look like this. A content standard. Every doctor who had a patient with diabetes would have to prescribe this much insulin every day. An achievement standard. Everybody in this room has to have a blood pressure of 120/80. Can I mandate that? Well, the government could. But would it ever happen? Well, no, because your blood pressure is a very individual thing. And so just because the government passes a law doesn't mean that your blood pressure is actually going to change. But in fact, that's what happened with this system. The government attempted by fiat to say every child will learn this thing at this time in this way, which is as nonsensical as attempting to mandate that everybody in this room have the same blood pressure. But that's what No Child Left Behind did. The standards were applicable to every public school student in the state in math and reading and eventually science. The states were told that they had described levels of performance. The top level was advanced, that's what you think. Proficient meant this is good enough, pass it. Basic, C-, D+. You didn't really fail, but you're not really there. The states were given benchmarks. Every year, you have to move this many more children up to the proficient level. That was the adequate yearly progress. So when you debate this, you hear about AYP. AYP came from No Child Left Behind, And it was the federal mandate to every state that this year 35% of your children have to be proficient, and next year 42%, and next year 61%. And so you had to keep moving forward to more and more children being proficient. How did they know? The states were told to develop assessments, annual assessments, state assessments, and that was what was used to measure the proficiency of the children. But the states could define proficient however they wanted. By the close of the 2013-2014 school year, No Child Left Behind said every state had to prove that 100% of their children were proficient in math, reading, and science on the state assessments. So what did the states do? Well, let me show you. Stand up. Michael, exercise is good for you. There you go. This is vocal performance. When you can sit down, you can meet when you meet my standard, you can sit down. But you cannot sit down until you meet the standard. Are you ready? Luciano Pavarotti. Anybody who can sing like Pavarotti, considered one of the greatest tenors of the 20th century. Soloist with the New York Met. Chorus member with the New York Met. Soloist with the Regional Symphony. Chorus member with the Regional Symphony. Soloist with the church choir. Sings in the church choir. This is a very unmusical group. Sings in the shower and enjoys it. Can't carry a tune in a bucket. Can't find the bucket. Now, I am the state. I am mandated to say that all of the children in this state will be proficient in vocal performance, or I will be punished. But I can set the standard wherever I want. Where am I going to set the standard? Well, where did you sit down? In the shower. I am a teacher in a classroom. My evaluation is tied to all of my kids passing the test to prove that they can sing in the shower and enjoys it. Where am I going to spend all my time? If Mr. and Mrs. can't carry a tune in a bucket out there, getting them up to sings in the shower and enjoys it. What about Miss can't find the bucket? Well, Mr. can't find the bucket. I'm going to ignore him because I know he'll never get to the shower. So I'm going to cut my losses and try to get that number as close as I can to 100. So I'm going to ignore the children on the bottom, which is why in the system achievement gaps didn't get smaller at all. What about the child for whom the standard should have been Pavarotti? Well, that child walked into that classroom already able to sing in the shower and enjoy it. So they would pass the test. So it was a success. And the teacher could ignore him. And they did. And all the research shows that when this system went into place, because of No Child Left Behind and Goals 2000 before it, the teachers ignored the top and the bottom. And then they reported in survey after survey after survey that they felt really guilty about that, but they didn't get any reward whatsoever for moving one child 1 inch beyond that minimum standard. But they were punished if everybody didn't get to the minimum standard. So they focused on the minimum standard. And education, instead of being about the child, became about meeting that standard. Could anybody see that coming? Well, yeah. I actually I was an advisor to the Reagan administration, so I was there a lot. And President Reagan, and at the time Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, an R and a D, they actually got along pretty well. They were like drinking buddies, two Irish gentlemen who enjoyed a beer. So when they weren't doing politics, they got along pretty well. And they decided that they should look at the status of education in America. And so they put together, and Congress authorized a commission that spent 18 months looking at education. The results of that commission was a document called A Nation at Risk. And in A Nation at Risk, the commissioners actually looked at what was then this beginning minimum competency, minimum standards movement, and they said, it's a mistake. Because the document said the minimum will become the maximum. And education for everybody will go down. And in fact, that's what happened. In New York, your state, because remember you could set proficient wherever you wanted, and the level that was proficient was called a cut score. Like if you make the football team, you make the cut. So your state decided that they were going to change, this is right from your New York State Department of Education website, they changed the cut scores for your test. They changed them between 2009 and 2010. So in 2009, they said 77% of the kids were meeting the standard of English, and they decided that was too high. So they changed it. so that only 53% would meet it the next year. And in 2009, 86% were meeting the standard in math, and your department said, we think that's too high too, so they changed it so only 61% would meet it the next year. Now that's a huge change in the number of